morning, iCar, and welcome to another episode of Wake Up with YPN. I'm Kayla Fisher, co-chair of the Iowa City YPN. This morning's episode is presented by Viridian Credit Union. Today, I'm excited to be here with Tom Rutkowski, president of the Iowa Geothermal Association, who's going to help us learn the ins and outs of those types of systems as they're rising in popularity, and to help educate us on what we should know if we have buyers or sellers interested in a home with geothermal systems. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Kayla. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. We appreciate you joining us on a Monday morning to help us learn more about this, and we hear you are the one to ask. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I'm the current president of the Iowa Geothermal Association. I've been the president on that. This will be my third year in a row, and then I've been on the board since 2018. And then I'm also the Director of Business Development and Senior Project Manager at E&J Geothermal in Solon, Iowa. Been in the industry since a little before 2010, and then I grew up around HVAC my whole life, so been in the industry more or less my whole career.
Perfect. Well, that sounds like you will be the perfect person to answer all of our questions and help us be a little bit more educated when we go into homes that have these types of systems. Before we dive in, I just want to let our viewers know who may be watching live to put your questions down in the comments, because at the end we're going to do a Q&A with Tom for any questions that we may not get to. So jumping right into that, can you explain what a geothermal system is on the brief level for those who may not be as familiar?
Absolutely. So a geothermal system is a heat pump system. So it's a refrigerant-based heating and cooling system where we don't have any outdoor equipment. Our heat transfer is done in the ground through either a closed or open loop system. And we use that fluid and ground to more efficiently exchange the heat in your home. Got a little slideshow here I can go through and give you some more information. So what is Geo? It's clean, it's energy efficient, it's comfortable heating for your home, shop, or business. Again, we use that loop in the ground to either extract or reject heat from that conditioned space. Typically, it's an all-electric option. However, there are versions of these units available where if somebody wanted to retain a gas furnace for backup, that is an option. And then there's no more of these hot and cold spots in a house. The whole idea with Geo is low and slow. So because we're moving air more often at a very low amount of energy, you're going to have better heat migration throughout that conditioned space, better filtering, and then basically you're exchanging that air more frequently. Applications, again, new construction, retrofit applications, which is a huge market. Really, it's kind of exploded in the last 4 or 5 years. It's a great alternative for commercial applications, shops, houses or barndominiums, I call them, and then cabins. But really, the two that have just taken off in the last couple of years, the retrofit and then the commercial side have just exploded. That ground loop. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can put that loop in the ground. There's a horizontal slinky, which is what you typically see when we dig a large hole, about the size of a swimming pool, roughly. We build what looks like a large slinky, drag it in, and I'll have some pictures of it later here, or a horizontal bored loop, which is very similar process to when you see them boring in fiber on the side of the road. But we'll come out there. It's very minimally invasive, and typically that's something you'd see more from a retrofit application because we don't want to disturb the grass that's already in that yard. Vertical loop is another option. It's not as cost effective as compared to a horizontal type loop. However, if you're doing a large commercial property or if you're doing a lot that's just physically not possible to get that ground loop in horizontally, that is an option. Or rock. If you have rock at a very shallow depth, that'd be a good option. Pond loops. Get a lot of questions about these pond loops. It is an option. However, you do need temperature inversion in the pond. So if you're aerating it, or if you've got a bubbler or something of that nature, you would not be able to have that run in the wintertime because you need that flip with the temperature in the pond for it to work properly. And then open loop, which is very rare anymore. Pump and dump system is another word for it. The DNR is really striking down on getting away from that, and it's not as efficient as the other closed loop options. So one thing I hear a lot, you got a really small yard, is it still going to work? Yes, absolutely. That directional boring machine can fit in some really tight spots. Downtown Iowa City, we've done them down there in those very narrow lots. So we can get into some pretty tight areas. This is what that machine looks like. And what you'll have is an initial hole about 10 to 15 feet long, about 3 feet wide, and that's your header pit. The machine sits behind it, bores down to the header, and then we'll shoot to a target depth, usually about 12 to 15 feet down. Bore horizontally and then pop out on the other end, hook up the pipe, and then pull it back. So with the exception of that first hole, you'd really never know we were ever there. Once all the pipe's in the ground, they turn the machine, go and bore into the basement of the house. If it's a retrofit, we'll actually cut a hole in the basement floor and dig down, and they'll bore right into that hole with the pipe. This is that slinky loop like we talked about, a lot more invasive as far as tearing up the ground. So this is what you typically would see with new construction where you have to grade it all out anyways. It is lower cost, so definitely helps on the financial side of things. And it performs just as well. When it's designed properly, there shouldn't be any difference in performance between this or a horizontal bore or vertical loop. Another picture of it. This was from one of Alliant Powerhouse's segments they did on us. They had a drone go out there and take some overhead shots. You can kind of see this one here. So that's the foundation for the house on the right there. They capped it for the winter. And then roughly it's the more or less the same square footage of the house. Just in this case, we did it in this particular spot so it could leave room for the septic and the well. But again, they're going to grade all that out anyway. So when we backfill it, it'll be a rough grade, and then they'll come in and pack it down, and away they go. On the commercial side of things, this was the job we did down in Cedar Rapids, converting this old warehouse into mixed-use commercial. We did directional boring underneath and then came over the top with slinky like this. But again, a lot of different applications. This was another commercial property. This was actually the first building in Cedar Rapids to be part of the flood wall. So there's, again, combination of boring and slinky here. It was actually dry, but at the time we had bored, it was extremely wet there. And that's something to bring up too. The wetter that ground is, the more thermal conductivity you're going to have and the better it's going to perform. So if someone has an area that's really, really wet, that's an awesome opportunity to put in geothermal. Vertical loop. So that's a typical well rig. The process is actually very similar to dropping a normal domestic water well. Just instead of putting in that casing, you're going to drop your geothermal HDPE pipe, just it's like a very tough PEX basically. But they'll drop that down there and then grout it. But the process of drilling is very similar. And that's something, if you are going to do vertical, this is where the DNR will step in. We'll have to pull a permit. Depending on where you're at, they'll do a review for anything that could possibly contaminate during the drilling process, and where you might have some additional paperwork. But otherwise, those other two, the horizontal bore and then the slinky, as long as you stay 19 feet or shallower, the DNR has very minimal regulation. We don't have to pull separate permits or anything like that. So a lot easier from the installation and paperwork side of things. Pond loop, a couple different ways of doing it. A lot of times we build these heat exchangers, take them out, weight them down, and then take the lines back into the house. Again, not as popular because of that temperature inversion. Most people are putting in that aerator now, so it kind of eliminates this. As far as the types of geothermal units, water to air unit is the most typical, and that would sit right where your furnace does. In this upper picture here, it's this one on the right. Your ductwork would connect to it. You still have normal ductwork, just like in a house with a furnace and AC. On the bottom there, you'll see it's a hydronic application, water to water geothermal unit. And really the difference between the two is the air handling section, right? So on the top one, you're creating hot or cold air. On the bottom one, you're creating hot or cold water. So the bottom is what we do for like radiant heat in a shop, converting from like a boiler, things of that nature. As far as financial benefits, so there are a lot of tax credits and rebates that are available for these systems. So on the tax credit side of things, this would apply to both your first and second residence. It does not apply to a rental property. There's a separate tax credit for that. But you'll have your utility company rebate, and then you'll have a 30% federal tax credit. And that's going to be going on all the way through 2032. And then there's a phase out for the 2 years after that. That was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a state tax credit through the end of this year for 6%. And then the home value itself, when you put geothermal in that property, on average, we see about a $10,000 to $12,000 increased in the assessed value for that house. The state does not make you pay property tax on that for 10 years. It's one of their kickbacks for doing geo. It's a very simple one-page form. You take it down just like you're doing your homestead credit down to the county. And then that's equity that you were able to realize in the home. It's kind of interesting because geothermal is the only type of heating and cooling that will add appraised value like that. You can have the absolute best furnace and AC in the world, fully modulating, communicating, etc., and you won't get a dime for it. But if I put in a really basic geothermal system, you get that increased value to the house. So that's where you're coming in and we're talking with these homeowners and trying to get through their head. It's not just more efficient. It's not just a more comfortable way to do this for your house. It's actually a better investment in the long run. Excuse me. The reduction in utility bills and usage, it varies a little bit depending on what utility company and what the price of natural gas or LP is. Typically, we're going to see about a 60 to 70% on average reduction in your heating, cooling, and electric water heating costs. If you were on certain energy providers, it could be closer to 50%, but it just depends on that individual house. Reduced maintenance costs. Well, nice thing with geothermal, because it does your heating and cooling, we only have to go out once a year. We can do it all in one shot, so you have less maintenance. And then it's better warranty. Typical units will come with a 10-year part and labor warranty allowance. And then the pipe in the ground has a 50-year warranty from the manufacturer. I honestly never had to apply for the pipe warranty for the ground. Typically, if it's ever damaged, it's because somebody did physical harm to it. And at that point, your insurance would kick in and really wouldn't be a warranty matter. But it's extremely tough. It's not exposed to UV because it's buried, so the pipe degradation really doesn't occur. Honestly, I think the pipe in the ground will be in the ground longer than the house itself. On the commercial side of things, and this is where it would apply for like rental properties. So there's the utility company rebates again. There's a federal tax credit up to 30%, and that is transferable. So you can sell that, and there's companies out there that will buy those credits. If you're a nonprofit or school, library, etc., then you would get a direct payment from the Treasury in lieu of a tax credit. And then there's kickers they have in there. So if it's a domestically made product made in the USA, there's an additional 10% and up to another 10% if it happens to be on a brownfield site, or there's a whole bunch of contingencies in there if it's next to like a coal-fired power plant that was closed. And I usually tell people the 30 and the 10 for made in USA are pretty easy to achieve. That 10% for the brownfield site, it's got to be just the right spot. Huge reduction in your utility bills when you're talking, going from like a commercial rooftop unit to a packaged geo unit. You're very easily down to that 70% reduction just because the unit is that much more efficient. A lot less maintenance costs, better warranties. A lot of our rental jobs we've done, the owner of the property has been able to raise the rent price because they're offering more of a high performance rental, and they're able to promote that there's going to be a lot less utility costs for that owner, renter. And then you also are able to get the 179D tax deduction. It used to be, I think, $1.40 or $1.50 a square foot. Now it's up to $5 a square foot. And this is where we kick in with your whole energy performance package. So not just geo, but like your insulation, your lighting upgrade, et cetera. But it's something you can double dip. You can take the tax credit and you can take that tax deduction. Again, the comfort's a very big part of this. So Geo operates at a lower temperature heat exchanger. We use a coil than a conventional furnace. So as far as humidity is concerned, it's going to leave the humidity in the air longer when you're in heating season because it's not cooking it off. And then in the summertime, when we're cooling, it's going to remove humidity better because we're having those longer run times at a very low amount of energy. These units are multiple stage. Most of them are two-stage units. So most of the time it will operate at about 50% capacity. And that's how we get that real long run time. But when it operates at that capacity, you're at a much more efficient energy factor. So when sizing, it's very important that we size these units correctly. And then the consistent temperatures. Again, it's kind of low and slow with a crock pot. That guy that used to do the commercials for the those crock pot things, set it, forget it. I wish we could have nailed him for Geo because he would have been perfect. But just leave it. If you like it 70 degrees, just set it there and leave it. Don't worry about it. The whole of having to set back at night or to save gas and all that, that's all out the window. Just leave it where you want it. It'll modulate where you like it, and then it'll be extremely efficient. Cooling that makes sense. So I've always thought air conditioners are inherently inefficient, right? You're taking heat from a house, you're trying to throw it outside into more heat. And that's why you see these condensers getting so big outside is in order to get the efficiency rating set by the government, they have to have huge coils with large fans to move that much air to reject heat. With us, we're taking heat from the house, we're throwing it into a ground loop. It's always going to be about 50 to 55 degrees in the ground. So it's going to naturally want to take that heat easier from the house. And it's just extremely efficient, right? So, and one thing I want to clarify, because I get this question a lot, that loop in the ground is not the water that's being forced over a coil for your air. So that loop in the ground goes into the Geo unit. It goes through a coil that has a refrigerant on one side and your ground loop solution on the other. And then from there, it's still just an air coil, just like your normal air conditioner, but it's all inside that packaged unit. So even though your ground loop's 50 degrees, you might be creating 120 degree air or 43 degree air. It just depends, what you're in. But it's basically our method of heat exchange, not a direct temperature for the air going into the space. So pricing, right? So I just kind of rough numbers. Construction 3,000 square foot house, and this one, the Geo contract was for a little under 30 grand. The furnace and AC, I think it was a modulating furnace with like a two-stage AC. Was $17,275. The rebate on this one was $1,800. The state tax credit was different when I did this one for this person, but it should be 6%. But it was about 16,833. Figured about 10 grand for the appraised value increase, so their net investment would have been about $6,800. On the furnace and AC, it doesn't have any of that, so you're in for the 17,275. So again, we're looking at this from an investment standpoint, right? So even if you took the appraised value out, you're still talking a little bit less than the furnace and AC, and then you're going to have a better warranty, a more efficient unit, and something that's going to save you a lot of money in utility bills. On a retrofit application, it was about the same. We were able to change a little bit with this one because of the going from slinky to directional boring, offset some of the ductwork cost. But the replacement furnace is a little under 11 grand, about 28 to do the Geo. Those tax credits again, 16,000 was the end cost to the homeowner before the appraised value increase. So on the utility savings alone, it paid back in about 4 years for this one, if I remember right. On the rental property side of things, and this is where it gets real interesting, right? So figure about 28 again. You have the larger tax credit. The end investment was, well, say about 4,000 more, but that appraised value going up. Most of these rental properties are sold 5 to 10 years. Someone will hang on to it and then sell it. So that is equity that you're going to realize in a fairly short order. Or if you go and you're going to borrow against that property to buy further properties or any kind of play like that, then you would have this additional equity to consider. Lifetime savings, this is where it starts to add up real big. I don't know if it says it behind the slide thing here. But in the 20-year lifespan of the unit, assuming you didn't have to change out your furnace before then, just the utility savings alone would be about $24,000. So it's a huge amount of money that you're leaving on the table by not doing Geo. This was new construction. Retro natural gas was 18,703 versus versus LP gas. And I want to say this was done at like I think it was $1.80 on. It was 43,498 for new construction. So I mean, just a huge amount of money. And then retrofit was about 38. That LP, especially when you're out in the county, the payback period is so fast. I mean, we're talking basically as fast as you're going to get the rebate from the government. There's really no reason not to do it. One summary, geothermal saves a lot of money, better warranties, it's better for the environment, and then it's just more consistent comfort. It's just a better way to heat and cool your house. It's technology that's been around for decades. I mean, just E&J, we've been here for 47 years, and this isn't new technology. I think it's starting to be kind of a resurgence of it. There was a big push for it when the tax credits first came out. It'd be right around 2008 through like 2014. There was a huge push. A bunch of people started doing Geo, and then the tax credit went away for a year. A bunch of people jumped off of it. And now that there's kind of a green initiative and people are just being smarter about making a better home package, there's kind of another resurgence coming up here. But in our climate, when you're talking green, this is all about heat pump technology, right? So our ground is not affected by outdoor air temperature. We hear a lot, we go up against air source heat pumps, right? Problem with an air source heat pump is that heat pump, when it gets below about 30 degrees outside, loses a lot of efficiency. Even though they can rate them down to -5, -12, once you hit that 30 or so degree mark, it becomes a lot harder to extract heat from the air. So even though it operates at that low temperature, it's not very efficient at that low temperature. And eventually it will shut off. You have to have backup in place. And then on the service side of things, if you have a leak or something where you have to braze outside and it's -5, there is no fixing that. You can't get the metal hot enough to take a braze. So there's some very real physical limitations to air source heat pumps in our region. Geo doesn't have it. We're dealing with a ground loop. It's always consistent year round. Any of the repairs we do are going to be inside the house. It's just it's a lot better suited for our climate. But yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that crash course in geothermal. I feel like I learned a lot. One of the things that made me smile was that you said it's like a crock pot for your house. And while you were describing that, I was like, it sounds like a crock pot. Like I can picture what a crock pot is. And so that was helpful and interesting that you threw it in there. And that would be a great marketing tactic if you could get that. Guy, for anyone watching live, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I don't know if we have any thus far. When a property with geothermal sells, what type of inspection would you recommend the buyer to get done prior to closing?
Sure. Excuse me. So we do a lot of these at E&J. Basically, we can come out and we'll have a time where we can go with one of our service techs, bring the client out there, and we can kind of show them what's going on with that geo unit. Depending on who installed it, there's some little variances and to like how they did the loop manifolding or their pump setup. But we can kind of show them how that particular geo unit would work and kind of give them a crash course on the things that they would need to keep up on versus stuff they would call us for. We can go through the unit and do more or less a check on it. We wouldn't be replacing parts, but we can go and say, hey, there's signs of potential damage, or there's a lot of wear and tear on electrical components, and then put together a list of, hey, this is some stuff we recommend, or, hey, this thing's 24 years old. You might want to start putting some money aside for a replacement unit, and this is about what it would cost. But that's what I would recommend, having one of the service guys go out and just kind of go through things and then use that time not only to look over the system, but also educate that buyer on that particular unit.
Yeah, I think that's a great point there. Sometimes inspections are not only to learn about what may or may not need to be done or upgraded or changed, but also to educate the buyer on what they're getting into, because it is a kind of a unique system. It's not done in a majority of homes, especially in certain price points. And so buyers who may be moving up into that level would benefit from the education session. And why do you think that geothermal, aside from the tax benefits, has grown in popularity recently, even though it's been around for a while?
I think people are just getting a little more educated as far as better performance for their homes. The green initiative, there's that end of it for sure, but it really is just a better, more efficient way of heating and cooling a house. A lot of traditional HVAC contractors have just pushed furnace and AC or even air source to death just because they aren't a true, geothermal installer. Everyone has their niche. But now that the homeowners are basically online, they're getting a lot of this information more readily available. They're seeing that, hey, there's a better way to heat and cool my house. And then the tax credits from the government is a very big part of it. When they're able to throw around covering 30 to 40% of this, it makes it a lot easier to swallow.
For sure. And then one other thing I wanted to ask was, you mentioned the classification of this type of system as a well. Can you explain how that classification came to be?
Mainly on the vertical side of things. So the DNR started regulating, like I said, at 20 feet and deeper, unless you're in like a waterway or something like that. But when you get into that realm with the DNR, you do have to pull a well permit. And the way the Iowa DNR works, the permitting process is extremely similar to doing a domestic well, right? So we have to have a certified well driller do the drilling itself. And they don't, they were working on this, but it's hit a couple hurdles. They're licensing for that well you had to have the exact same license to do geothermal as you would putting in a domestic water well. It's something they're trying to get split, hopefully. But as it sits, it would be the same type of person that would do a domestic water well. As far as the horizontal, the shallower ones, sometimes we hear them called wells, just kind of industry slang. However, it's really it should be called a horizontal closed loop system, is what it would be called.
Okay. I appreciate that verbiage. And what are some other resources for the realtors in our viewership here? If they are going to be listing a home or assisting a buyer who's really interested in getting a home with geothermal specifically, what are some resources they could use to further educate themselves or send on to their clients to help them understand more about what the system is and the benefits available?
Sure. So the Iowa Geothermal Association is a great place to start. It's got a list of contract members that typically are more involved in the geothermal community. And then I would look into your particular area. So like in the area here, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, I'd recommend going to our website. It's www.ejgeothermal.com. There's a ton of info on there on geothermal, pictures of installs, testimonials, etc. And then also the excuse me, manufacturer websites. So I look at like Climate Master would be one. They have a really good website. Water Furnace, Bosch, GeoComfort. All these manufacturers usually have some information, but you can get directed from the Iowa Geothermal Association as well.
Perfect. Well, I think we've covered a lot of information in 30 short minutes. And so I feel like a lot of the people that might be watching may have had questions, but with your presentation, it was very thorough and helped answer kind of those on the surface questions that we can have and know and pass that information on to our people. Is there anything else that you think we should cover or things that our viewers might want to know?
I would just put out there, if we're talking from a realtor's perspective, this is technology that I've used in just about every corner of the market, right? So don't be afraid to throw this out there. And when you're talking with someone that has an old furnace and an old air conditioner, don't just assume you have to put another furnace and AC in. If somebody's looking at making an energy efficient home, and the housing market right now kind of is what it is, a lot of the homes aren't for sale. But if it's not energy efficient right now, you can make an energy efficient home. And geo's a very big jump, right? So like when you're looking at an inefficient house, windows, insulation, and heating and cooling are the number 1, 2, and 3, right? So if you can take care of one of those, it's going to make that house a lot more attractive. Maybe they'll be at a better price point, As far as new construction goes, always work with the builder. A good builder should be open to working with different contractors. And I say that because a lot of the guys that are doing furnace and AC work might not be doing a ton with geo because it does take a little bit longer. It takes a couple more days on the construction schedule. But in the end, it's a much better quality product for your homeowner. Do your education. Talk with some people maybe that they aren't doing their typical furnace and AC work with that specialize in this technology. And then even like if they were to call us and they said, hey, we want, so-and-so to do the ductwork. Okay, that's something we can work with. The ductwork component's very straightforward side of it. But doing the loop and the piping inside, the hydronic side of it, that's something you want someone that's very good with geothermal to do, because that's where it can get screwed up in a hurry.
So you brought up a really good question. With this different type of heating and cooling system, what is the difference inside the home? There's still ducts, there's still air vents, and there's still a thermostat in the home, right?
Yeah, so it depends on what type of system, right? So like a typical house that would normally have a furnace and AC, you still have normal ductwork, you still have a thermostat. And really the biggest thing is you don't have a condenser outside. That condenser is gone entirely. It's inside of our Geo unit because it does both. And then the down where the furnace sits, you're going to see, where the pipe comes up, you'll have a manifold with a pump. But otherwise, it's going to be a lot quieter. It's going to be safer. There's no combustible portion to it. And honestly, a lot of homes that we're doing anymore, quite a few of them don't even put in gas. It's a monthly charge. I think the minimum right now with Mid-American is somewhere around $20 to $30 a month just to have a meter. If all it was doing was a gas range or a fireplace, a lot of people are looking at either steam or electric fireplaces, and then going to like a induction or some nicer end of electric based stove. So you can eliminate $30 of your monthly bill just by not having gas.
Yeah, lots of different options, and it sounds like it'd be good for someone who's either interested in, investing in their home and making upgrades or changes to a system that's, aging out, and putting these options side by side and educating themselves on the different options, both on price point, but also on utilitarian levels moving on, for maintenance costs and everything. It sounds like, it's worth pursuing, and if no one price point is more worthy of upgrading than another.
Yeah, I usually have a conversation with every homeowner what we try and do stuff with, just so they're very well educated on it. And what I always have to go back and talk about is, countertops, right? Every new home out there, they want quartz or granite or, these nicer countertops. Yeah, the cheap ones, yeah, they can still hold a pot. They can still, they work just as well, but everybody wants that better product. Do something a little better on the heating and cooling that's actually going to help you. It's going to reduce your costs and make you more comfortable. This is same thing we're talking about here. And at the end of the day, if you're upgrading your countertops, it might be another $5,000 to $10,000. We're talking about $4,000 difference for a furnace and AC versus the Geo. If you take away the equity portion, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Make that up in a couple of years, and then that's just extra money in your pocket.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely, maybe not the most glamorous thing to think about heating and cooling, whereas countertops and paint colors and all of those things are fun to pick out. But this seems like it's a very worthy point of discussion to have some serious conversations about and to consider all the options out there. Tom, I think this has been a great session where we can educate our viewers. We don't have any questions as of now. I think we've done such a great job. We've got some positive comments coming in here. But thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing some information with us that we can use to better assist our buyers and sellers and potentially people who are building new homes. If anyone has any questions, Tom is the president of the Iowa Geothermal Association and is a great resource. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments. We'll get to them. Otherwise, have a great Monday and use this information down the road.